Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland. And this is my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. Things are getting interesting here in my deep dive into Kubrick's work as we get into Lolita, which I would probably say out of his major releases is probably my least favorite. The thing that I go back to the least. This was probably only the second time I ever watched this film to prepare for the show, but we're going to get there. But this show has three parts. We start off with coming attractions for the particular week that this episode is airing, and then we get into our feature of the week, which I just mentioned. We're going to be talking about Lolita. And then we get into some recommendations, which, not going to lie, this week I have some very strong ones, so I'm looking forward to chatting about those. But let's get started with upcoming attractions, and we're taking a look at Friday, July 23rd. So just to throw some out there, we have Snake Eyes, G.I. Joe Origins, because they have the properties. Joe Bell, which seems to be Mark Wahlberg putting in a much more dramatic kind of performance. A Kate Beckinsale Amazon film called Jolt. Mandibles, which is a really strange and interesting, oddball French dark comedy about what two idiots would do when they find a giant fly and what they would try to do to make money with it. You have the theatrical release of Val, the new Amazon documentary about Val Kilmer, but the one that I'm most excited about is Old. And I remember growing up loving Signs and The Sixth Sense and Unbreakable and being such a huge Shyamalan fan. Watching The Village, I enjoyed it a lot more than a lot of people do. After that, things start to go downhill, and I remember almost falling asleep 6 times watching After Earth in the theaters, and the only reason that I almost fell asleep, I fell asleep 6 different times is because my girlfriend, now fiance, just kept waking me up the whole entire time. I'm like, just let me sleep. But then The Visit was fun. Split happened. And you're like, oh my god, is Shyamalan back? And then Glass was interesting. It was an interesting choice. And now we have Old, which has an interesting concept. You're on this beach, you're trapped on this beach, and for some reason your whole life is going by within this day. And it's creepy and an unnerving idea. What's happening? What's causing it? I'm like, this high concept idea, I'm ready to see what Shyamalan does with it. This has a fantastic cast of Gael Garcia Bernal, Vicky Krieps, Rufus Sewell, Alex Wolff, Thomasin McKenzie. Not gonna lie, some of the acting seems a little iffy. And some of the choices in the trailer. But it's an interesting idea, has a strong cast, and Shyamalan still has a lot of juice left in there and can really craft an intriguing thriller. And I'm looking forward to finding out what the twist is because, you know, it's a Shyamalan film. There's probably a twist. And the trailer is freaky and unnerving enough for me to be like, I want to see this. I want to figure out what happens. The mystery hooked me, the thrills are sure to be there, and I like a lot of the performers that are in the film as well, and Shyamalan has a track record of making some of the best thrillers in cinema in the past 25 years. Most of them were definitely towards the beginning of that, but interests me enough. So I'm definitely down to check out Old. There's a lot coming out this weekend. Those weren't even all the films that I mentioned, but Old's definitely one that piques my interest the most, and I'm looking forward to most to figure out, is this going to be a good film? And we're going to find out, and I will be sure to have a review coming your way on the Wasteland Reviewer YouTube channel. So that's the coming attraction for this week. I'm interested to hear what all of you think of Old. Comment below, and definitely interested in talking about it once it does come out because it seems like it's going to be one of those kinds of films. But now to shift gears into our feature of the week, like I said, Lolita. And this is from Vladimir Nabokov's novel, who did the screenplay as well. And you have Stanley Kubrick, who is uncredited on the screenplay, because I'm sure he did plenty of things to it. And obviously he directed this film. And this is starring James Mason as Professor Humbert, and Shelley Winters as Charlotte Hayes, and her daughter Lolita, played by Sue Lyons, and of course, Peter Sellers, and all the crazy things that he does in this film. Now, this is a very controversial film. Very obviously. A lot of people have, obviously the idea of this older man falling for this very young woman is really creepy and unnerving. Does this film glorify that love? I don't think so. But is it hard to watch? Yes. Do I feel like they needed to make a film like this? Probably not. But Kubrick is not the kind of person to shy away from challenging his audience. And along with Eyes Wide Shut, this is definitely the most outwardly sexual film that Kubrick made. And there's a lot of controversy around it. Obviously, they made Lolita a little bit older than in the book, but still really creepy. Because not only do you have one older man creeping after her, you have two. And throughout this film, Kubrick is able to do his technical thing. It's a beautiful black and white film. Each shot is perfectly framed, and everything is done very specifically. You start off with the shot of feet, and young woman's feet, and that kind of just sets the tone for the strange and disturbing kind of story that we're about to go through. And one quick shout out watching this film for the second time and them having a I'm Spartacus reference was pretty interesting, especially as this was his next film after Spartacus. And especially because that was probably his least favorite experience with being a big studio film. Kubrick wasn't really about that. You start off so interestingly in this rundown mansion, this disheveled, disgusting place. Confrontation between James Mason and Peter Sellers. And they're fantastic performers, both of them. Mason has this regalness about him, this manner about him, this sophistication about him. But there's something gross and disturbing underneath throughout this whole entire film. There's fear, there's unnervedness, there's a hesitation about everything, and manipulation, as he manipulates a lot of people in this film. And then, speaking of manipulation, what Sellers is able to do with his accents, his characters that he puts on throughout this film, is so much and so memorable. And that's when Sellers is at his top, is really bringing these characters to life. And his character is messed up and disturbing, along with Mason's character. And they come to this climax here at the beginning of the film. And it's such an interesting idea to start at the end and have Mason attack, shoot, and kill Peter Sellers from the start for what did happen. And we haven't seen it yet. So now we're really intrigued. And that was a great choice for Kubrick to set up this story this way and structure it this way. And this is a dark comedy. There's some disturbing things going on in this film that they have a lot of fun with. And it's almost to the point where it's so dark, it's I don't feel comfortable laughing, but it's funny. And you have Shelley Winters, who's great in Night of the Hunter, who's also great in this. The vulnerability, the desperation that she has as she's just trying to throw herself at James Mason. And there's this jealousy, this weariness. And there's a moment later in the film where she reads a particular thing that really sets her off and leads to tragedy. And Winters is fantastic. She's a really talented actress who's able to sell this role so perfectly. Then you have it. That first shot of Lolita. Her with the big sunglasses, the big hat on, and the bikini in the backyard, and Mason just... Ooh, that look of attraction on his face, and you're just like, this is a girl! And it's the way that Kubrick shoots her. It's so engrossing, and you're just looking at her. And you know it's one of those kinds of shots in a film where the film's really trying to be like, hey, look at her. And obviously he's doing that on purpose to subvert those things that happen in so many movies. But at the same time, it's hard to watch because it's just like it makes you feel gross and disgusting. Or if it doesn't, that's a whole other conversation. But you have this shot, and Sue Lyon, who plays Lolita, is so committed to this role, and she's very smart and has a very impressive performance here as she's playing with some of the other characters against each other, against themselves, and there's a lot of manipulation. Everybody's manipulating everybody in this film. And you have that first moment of them sitting at the drive-in together, mother on one side, daughter on the other, and they both grab James Mason's legs, and he starts patting on Lolita's hand, and you just like see that visual, and you're just like uncomfortable. And then mother puts her hand on his hand, and then he's like, oh. And you're just like, okay, we see where his head's at. There's something gross and disturbing in that. There's plenty of creepy gazes in this film. That those gaze at Lolita from so many male characters in this film are so unnerving and creepy. And just the way that Kubrick shoots them puts such a judgmental gaze upon them, gazing upon her. And that's a dark way of looking at it as we're pushed into our faces. And this is a film that has a lot of sexuality about it. Him running into these two other adults, they're swingers, and totally wanting to have some fun with him and Shelley Winter's character. And this kind of film going that way is so interesting, and like this goes headlong into like this isn't just like flirty and fun. There's seduction going on here. It's all sexual. There's a sexual drive about this film that puts you on edge, and especially when it challenges you when some of those sexual advances and gaze are upon a young woman who's like 14 or 15 at that. And you have this confrontation of God and religious beliefs thrown in here too, because there's some deep-seated, just gross commentary that Kubrick has here on humanity and shoving it in humanity's face as they watch his film. And you have all of these different things going on in this film, and this film pushes you to tragic places, really uncomfortable places. The way that once James Mason becomes the ward of Lolita, their extremely toxic and uncomfortable relationship that's going on in this film, you want her to get away because he's disgusting. And she's playing off of him, playing off of Sellers' character, who's equally as disgusting. And it's perturbing that both of them want this young woman so bad. And it's so fitting when it comes back around and we get back to where we started, the very end of this narrative of that confrontation between the two of them fighting over her when she finally finds a seemingly nice guy who's going to take care of her and be in a good place. And already she's knocked up and going to have a kid and all that kind of thing. And it's so interesting how this film confronts the taboo throughout this film in terms of the dark sexual things, these fantasies, these urges that the men have in this film, and the fact that it's all put onto this young woman, that you just feel dirty watching this film and trying to process exactly what's going on here. This is a challenging film. This is not an easy viewing. Most Kubrick films are not. This is really uncomfortable and hard to watch. And I can see why a lot of people are just like, this is disgusting, and how could you ever watch this film? Thinking about it from just literally what's going on in the film and not exactly what the film is trying to commentate on. But the thing is, for you to get through that commentation, you have to get through some uncomfortable moments and be able to sit through and process those things. And that's tough. This is not an easy watch. This is not an easy film to process, and this is not something that most directors would get away with. And Kubrick just goes out there all in and really sends it. And this is a 2.5 hour film. It's very character driven, very discussion, like dialogue based. There's not a whole lot of action going on in this film. And it's really about this deep dive into the deepest, darkest desires of humanity, of men. And seeing everything going on here is disturbing and uncomfortable. And I was really impressed by this tightrope that Kubrick is able to navigate throughout this film. And this film is not going to be for everyone. I don't think everybody's going to be okay sitting through this uncomfortable and disturbing and strange journey. But there's a lot to be said here in terms of what Kubrick is able to do as a director and a storyteller. And I'm really impressed with this film, even though it'll surely make you very uncomfortable. But those are my thoughts on Lolita. I think if you're a big Kubrick fan, this is worth checking out. I don't know if this is a film that I would definitely recommend to everybody. If you're a cinephile, I think it's worth checking this out and challenging yourself to see how you process what's going on here. Because for me, by the end of this film, you have Mason, you have Sellers, and they're despicable human beings and are punished and charged at each other for what disgusting advances that they had on this young woman. And in the end, she's the one left on top. She's the one not dead or going to prison. And having a man who's treating her right, and they're going to have a child, and you're just like, she won. And by the end, that's a tight rope to walk in this film. So go ahead, go check out Lolita if you haven't, or if you have, comment below. Let me know what you think of the film, and let's talk some movies. But that's our feature for the week, Lolita, directed by Stanley Kubrick. And next week, we're going to be having Dr. Strangelove, which I'm very excited about, because I'm a huge fan of that film, have seen it quite a few times at this point. Now getting on to our recommendations, one film that I got around to check out, Quo Vadis, Aida, and this was nominated for Best International Film at the Oscars this year, lost out to Another Round. I thought 100% Another Round deserved it. And I saw a small minority being like, Quo Vadis, Aida deserved that Oscar. And I saw this and I'm like, dang. This film is Bosnian, if I'm not mistaken, about Srebrenica and this massacre that happened as the Serbian military comes in, and this woman, Aida, is desperately trying to help the UN get people out and safe, and involves her fighting for her husband and her children as she interprets. And this has such a strong emotional anchor to the film, but has so much to say about politics and global politics and the United Nations and the games that world powers play when it comes to these kinds of situations. This is a deep, intense, emotionally impactful film, beautifully shot, harrowing in the emotion and the themes and what it takes on. There's some really dark moments in this film that'll leave you devastated. And this is an impressive film. I'm so glad that I got around to checking this out. And I hope all of you do too. I checked it out on Amazon. I rented it. This is my number 2 film of 2021 so far, right behind The Father. And I'm really impressed by this film, and I hope more people go out and check it out. Now, my other film that came off of my watch list was Mary and Max. And this is an Australian stop-motion animated film about 2 pen pals. This very unpopular, quiet girl, Mary, in Melbourne, Australia, having this pen pal relationship with an obese man a severely obese man who happens to have Asperger's, and there are letters back and forth. So this is such an interestingly animated film. It's so detailed and beautiful and interesting. And then this is so raw and everything. You have an unfiltered young woman, this unfiltered man, just going back and forth. The voice cast is great. You have Philip Seymour Hoffman as Max. You have Toni Collette later in the film. Barry Humphries narrating, who has a perfect voice. It's so weird. It's idiosyncratic. It's strange. It'll probably make you feel uncomfortable. But in such a great way. It challenges you to look at the social norms of the world we live in through the perspectives of these two unique and interesting characters who have such a strange and unique relationship. And it's such a fascinating film. And if you haven't seen it, you really need to go check out Mary and Max. I also rented this on Amazon Prime, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure I rented it. Apparently it's on AMC Plus as well, so if you have that, you could watch that right there. It's streaming on there. But this is a really special animated film. Was really impressed by it. I heard about it from the Filmstagram Best Animated Film of All Time tournament from Magic of Film Instagram page, and I'm glad that I did because I was really impressed by this film and I loved it. It'll be added to my collection. But those are my recommendations for this week. So we have Old coming out in theaters from M. Night Shyamalan. We have a strange and uncomfortable and challenging film from Kubrick with Lolita. And these two very different but very impressively crafted and emotionally resonant films in the form of Quo Vadis, Aida, and also Mary and Max. And next week we have Dr. Strangelove, which I'm very excited to talk about. And also, I reached 400 subscribers. It only took me 5 years, almost to the day. And I'm very excited about that. So send questions that you want to be asking me. They could be movie related. They don't have to be. Send the questions over. I'm going to be doing a new Ask Your Wasteland Reviewer video to celebrate the 400 subscribers that I have on YouTube now. And I'm very excited. So I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope this intrigued you enough to go check out some of these films. They might be challenging. A lot of them are. But definitely worth your time. But thank you, as always, for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.